Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
And when I defended, it snapped my ear off. But you know what? I passed his guard still before I went to urgent care. I kept a log from 1983. I kept a log for 20 years straight. Coach in high school told me to always have a work log to show how hard you're working. And he goes, that way, if you get nervous before a race, you can look in your log and say, man, that guy didn't work harder than me, so I should be pretty good today. Hacked the house for a 10,000 meter was Eugene.
Yep.
You know, University of Oregon, they knew laps. They knew like if you're on 66 pace, 65, you know, they knew. And that was like the feeling that for wrestling was, man, everybody knew every little move that was being made. That last lap when we took off and they did that little, it was loud. And I think I ran 56.9, maybe 57, I'll say 57 flat, 42.22. And I don't know how it's still lasting, but it's still the American record.
What's up, y'all? This is Airey Bros Radio, and this is episode 93 with Todd Williams. You ready, Prince?
You kidding me, Richie Rich? We got an Olympian runner / jiu-jitsu black belt on the podcast. You better believe I'm ready for this one, dog.
Not just an Olympian, a two-time Olympian, and a third-degree jiu-jitsu black belt. What else can we say? I mean, growing up, Todd Williams was definitely hanging on the walls in the Airey Bros bedroom. Yep, that's right. We shared a bedroom. Had Todd Williams hanging all over the place. Stoked beyond stoked to have Todd on. We actually saw Todd tell the story in the beginning of the episode, so I won't disclose it now, but we actually ran into Todd in 2005 and actually had a conversation with him about jiu-jitsu. At the time, he was a purple belt. But he's got a lot of cool stuff going on. He's got a jiu-jitsu school in Monroe, Michigan. He's got his Run Safer clinics, workshops where he teaches the art of jiu-jitsu, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, as a self-defense if forever, God forbid, you have to protect yourself out on the run. So check all those things out. But man, what can I say? The hits keep on coming with Airey Bros Radio. You know what I'm saying, dog?
Yeah, man. This one was an honor and pleasure. Todd is definitely someone who's on the Airey Bros wavelength, so it was awesome to geek out on some jiu-jitsu, geek out on some old track that we used to watch back in the day, Prefontaine Classic, all that. So I am just stoked beyond stoked. And for all you runner, wrestler, jiu-jitsu guys out there, listen to this podcast. You're going to enjoy it, I promise. And if you like this podcast, you'll want to see what Todd's got going down. Check out the links in the show notes. Tell Todd the Airey Bros sent you. Rate, review, subscribe. Tell a friend. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Airey Bros Radio.
Yo, and like Jimmy said, when you're done, click on those show notes. If you're in the Michigan, Southeast Michigan area, I believe is where Monroe is, hit Todd up. Go learn from him. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's had the opportunity to train with some of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world. And he's just got a two-time Olympian fire underneath him. Just click on those show notes. And then the other thing we're doing now is we got the value for value. We also have the premium content over on Patreon. So go check us out on Patreon. You're getting exclusive Airey Bros daily challenge workouts, movement demos, breakdowns. You're also getting exclusive B-roll mixtape content from the Airey Bros, from Jules 2.0, and our accountability coaching as well. If you're trying to stay on track, trying to hit those goals, hit those marks, you need someone there every day to hit you up to make sure you're staying in line. Hit us up for the accountability coaching And then also with our value for value, there's some donation buttons in there. If you're getting any sort of value out of this, nutrition, workout, a new book, new podcast, one of our guests is presenting something that weren't hip to and now you're looking into it. By all means, if you're getting a little bit of value, hit us with one of those digital heavy handshakes and we'll give you a shout out and maybe we'll send you some swag. So as always, thanks for tuning in. Much love. Namaste from the boys of 1512.
The Airey Bros podcast. A couple dudes built pretty good, look good. They're based out of Colorado.
So the year is 2005. We were at the Boston Marathon. I am working at the expo. I was working for a company called Pacific Health Labs. They make accelerated Endurox R4. Jimmy had just finished his senior year of wrestling, and I think we were in like a Gap in the mall, right on there on Boylston Street.
We're in like a shoe store.
A shoe store maybe.
Yeah.
And I was on the phone. Jimmy was looking at something, and I just happened to look over. There's this gentleman that I recognize looking at my brother, like kind of just checking him out. And so whoever I was on the phone with, I said, "Hey, let me call you right back." And I said, "Oh my God." I'm like, "Are you Todd Williams?" And you're like, "Yeah." And you were like, "Oh, I was just checking out, your ears." And, he had his wrestling sweatshirt on. And then we had a conversation. At the time, you were a purple belt. And so, yeah, like I said, we were big fans as growing up as runners, but we were both wrestlers. Jimmy took it a little bit further as a wrestler. And then he has a 10th Planet purple belt. So he's been continuing on the mat and stuff like that. And we know you've done some crossover too with jiu-jitsu and with running. So we kind of just wanted to have a conversation with you, catch up with you, and use this time to see how Todd Williams is doing.
Nice. Life's pretty good. I'm down in Florida right now, so I'm visiting my daughters. I left my school in good hands with some of my assistant instructors. And being from Michigan and having a jiu-jitsu gym was a tough last few months. But I work with a lot of law enforcement and have some emerging professional grapplers. So kind of that's the way I got around it, is professional athletics were approved by Governor Whitmer. So I can't complain. I mean, I'm doing what I love to do every single day. And really when I think back on it, when I started my running at age 13 and now I'm 51, going on 52, I've just been fortunate that through all my hard work that I'm getting to do what I want to do. And it's kind of a dream. It's kind of a dream every day that I wake up, that I get to teach, influence, making a positive impact in my community. And I've met so many cool people over the years. It's I just don't want it to end. I just want to keep going.
Yeah. And so have you been down in Florida? Are you just visiting, or did you come down for a minute to get away from what's going on in Michigan?
No, I got down last week. So my daughter's still living here. So I lived down here for a while. And cool thing is I get to go back to my old school with my master, Master Luis Pajara. So I get to train. I get to see. It's funny. I get to see some of the kids that start. I was there on their first day, and now they're like black belts.
That's awesome.
It's like, man, and they're trying to get me now. It's like, I come back here. I play straight defense with some of these guys, but so I get to train. I get to see old friends. I get to visit my family. I get to learn a lot of stuff from, like, Pedro Pajaras is ranked 24th in the world in jiu-jitsu right now in the gi. I started to, I was training with him when he was 12, and now the guy's it's phenomenal to learn from somebody like that. So I get to take a lot of cool stuff back home to my school. On top of the most important part is spending time with my daughters down here. I come down here about once every 2 months and spend some time and train and spend time with my family.
What was it from running to jiu-jitsu? Were you doing jiu-jitsu when you were running, or did you finish running and you just needed something to kind of stay active?
That was it. I mean, my biggest thing is I wrestled as a kid. So coming from the Midwest, my mom and dad threw me into every sport, but I was in wrestling at, I think, 48 pounds, 50. I got certificates. You have the certificates, So I have like the 61 pound state, whatever it was. I got these medals and stuff. I just remember learning like double leg, single leg, half Nelson, all the basic fundamentals early in life. And then I kind of moved toward all the main three sports until I got into high school. started dedicating myself to running big time as a junior in high school. But once I retired from professional running in 2002-ish, I knew I needed something in my life because I have a super addictive personality, and I didn't want to do some other stuff that, so I wanted to support my life, and I loved UFC. I loved MMA from the days of 1993 when Hoist Gracie, got into the octagon the first time. And so, initially I didn't have I was living in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. And I didn't know I was going to go into jiu-jitsu. But what happened is I told myself, okay, I'm going to go into weightlifting. So I weighed like 140 pounds. I was super strict my whole life on my diet, except 2 weeks out of the year, I would go crazy for 2 weeks, and then 50 weeks super disciplined. But when I retired from running, I said, I'm just going to lift and get as big as I can get and just pump the weights, right? So about maybe a week into lifting, I'm driving across this road to my gym, and I look over to my right, and it says Gracie Baja Jiu-Jitsu, Progressive Martial Arts, with Jeet Kune Do, something, like a school. So I decided that was the day. I'll never forget. It was in April, and I drive in, and it was a little Brazilian guy named Soneca. And Soneca, if you look him up, is like a world-class, phenomenal instructor, world champion back in the 90s, about 5'7", 145, right? So he was the only guy in there. Nobody came to the lunchtime class. I show up. He goes, "You want to try?" And I go, "Yeah." So he gives me this gi, and he tells me, he goes, "You want to," he shows me a couple takedowns, and he shows me, some self-defense, and he goes, "You want to spar?" And I said, "Well, I wrestled like 45 years ago or so, 40 years ago. I don't know." And at that time I was 32. So I said, "I wrestled like 25 years ago or something." And man, he was really nice to me, but he totally controlled me. And I was like, I got addicted from day one. I was like, man, he goes, "You going to sign up?" I said, "I'll be back tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow. And then and I started going twice a day, 5 days a week from that point. And then, I haven't stopped. It's an addiction. To me, like when people talk about running, I love my running, and they say, how does it parallel? It's like running is a grueling sport, right? It's like, you got to keep getting up. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep grinding through the bad days. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu and judo, it's really similar, because you're going to get smashed. You're going to get your butt kicked. You're going to get tapped. You're going to get your ear ripped off, which I did 6 weeks ago, completely torn off my head.
Oh my God.
How many stitches?
6.
Damn.
Yeah, see, it's like, I can show you, I can send you a picture, but this guy took his gi behind my ear, and my ear is cauliflower pretty bad. And when I defended, it snapped my ear off.
Oh, dude. That's gnarly.
Yeah, so it's like, but you know what? I passed his guard still before I went to urgent care. And so my point is, to me, that transition was easy because I love a grind and I love being goal oriented, and it's something, jiu-jitsu is something you can never master. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps me learning every single day. Keeps me young, I think.
And so when you retired from running and you found the jiu-jitsu gym, jiu-jitsu still your main, I guess, outlet? Do you run it all now, or have you been running throughout the years since you retired?
Yeah, in my school I have a treadmill, but from day one, I've always kept my running for my conditioning. So like I'll go out and run, like right now I'm doing 5Ks a week. Not fast, but I still get out there and run 7-8 minute pace, and I do it more for my conditioning.
Okay.
So it's some jiu-jitsu, like I've trained, I've been fortunate. Actually, I'm still sweating because I came in straight from a run. But some of the guys that I've met over the years, they're really great. And again, I've been lucky to train with Marcelo Garcia, Salah Ribeiro, Shanji Ribeiro, Mikey Musameshi, JT Torres, Bernardo Faria. The list goes on. I mean, world champion after world champion. And, some of these guys run, but then they think I'm crazy. They're like, what? You just roll and roll. And I'm like, it helps me mentally to get out and get my runs in, and then I'll go train. It's kind of a stress reliever too. And I just feel it helps me against the young guys.
Yeah, I was just curious because in the times when I have done martial arts post college, it never registered like this was sufficient enough. Like I would still either make sure I got up early in the morning to get a run in, or I was going out after jiu-jitsu or judo practice. And really not being smart about it, because it's like, all right, you just got manhandled, mauled for 2 hours. Do you really need to go out and run for another hour or hour and a half? Like, let your body recover, let it relax. And so I've never fully let go of the running in a sense where it was just like an accessory. It was always like, well, this didn't count as training for the day until I went and got my run in. So I find that really admirable, that and inspiring and motivating, that you're able to just be like, you know what, I've had my run, had my rain. I found this new outlet. I'm totally mesmerized and enthralled with it, and this is all my chips are going here. So
And the great thing about my jujitsu is, I came from all those years of running, and I accomplished, I did the best that I could do, right? I put all my cards in there, but when I went into jujitsu, none of my jujitsu teammates or the other students, I didn't tell anybody that I ran ever. Like I went in there as a person off the street. Nobody knew I made the Olympics. No, I didn't say one word about it. But then when a couple people started putting two and two together, like, are you that guy, the runner guy? And I was like, because I just wanted to go and just be the jujitsu guy. And that's what I loved about it. It's just starting as a white belt, learning my first sweep, learning my first takedown, learning my first judo throw, learning my first submission. And then I just kept building from there. And then I just, and here we are going on 20 years later, and third degree on my black belt, or 10 years as a black belt. It's been a great ride. A lot of hard work, extreme hard work.
Did you have any problems? And just based on what you said, I don't think so, but being, one of the best runners in the country, making the Olympics, was it hard for you to go in and start at a white belt, or did you love it because no one knew who you were and you were learning something new?
I loved it. I loved getting that white belt. And then I didn't really, I had really good instructors. Like I said, Seneca was 6 months, and then he had to go back to Brazil. And then I ended up with Pedrino Bandao, who was another younger Gracie Baja black belt. And they stressed, like, there was no stripes. When I started, it was just the white belt. And they're like, keep training, and then your belt's going to change color. And then 10 months I trained twice a day, 5-6 days a week. I got my blue belt in like 7-8 months, because I was going all the time, right? And they're like, this guy is, so I really was. And that's what I try to tell my students now. I said, you have to keep coming, because it doesn't matter if you're black belt, doesn't matter if you're white belt. If you don't come, the journey never stops, and then what I also tell my students, the more your belt turns colors, the bigger target you are. So you better be ready to be able to handle that belt, because the wrestler that's all state, it's a white belt, get ready, because you better be able to handle that or even an all league wrestler. Like I love seeing like a kid that wrestled for his whole life, didn't go to college, but he walks in my school. I say, you wrestled? He goes, yeah, I've wrestled since I was 4. And I'm like, oh baby, here he's gonna. And so that's where I don't even. Belts are important, I think, for some, because it shows a sense of achievement, and I think that's part of it. To know you're making progression. But for me, just it's an art. You just keep coming.
And before you said that diet, you've always been super strict with diet. How much of a benefit do you think that had with your running, and how much of that do you think that elite athletes don't take in consideration, and that they should, and how important that is?
With me, I was so concerned. I was back in the 80s, and there wasn't, there's no internet. There's no quick information. There's no magic way. There wasn't a Nike, the Nike Oregon Pride, all this stuff, right? It was just, I stayed on campus. I met with a nutritionist once in a while, but I was so concerned about my weight. It's like, I kept a log from 1983. I kept a log for 20 years straight. Everything that I ate, the weather conditions, my weight training, like, it's pretty cool. Cause I'm writing a book right now, and it's to go back through and think like, man, I was pretty detailed, because my coach in high school told me to always have a work log to show how hard you're working. And he goes, that way, if you get nervous before a race, you can look in your log and say, man, that guy didn't work harder than me, so I should do pretty good today. And so when I started charting my diet, it was more like 141 felt great. 149, that's not good for me. So it's more like I got into that range. And then I did it in my professional career. I would get into the to see my body fat, and I would chart that. So like if I got too low and like nosebleeds, like I would just like wrestling, right? There's optimal weight, and then there's like I'm too skinny, and then you're done. So I did more of that, and then my food was really just sensible, like a bowl of Wheaties in the morning with a banana. My afternoon would be vegetables with pasta with marinara sauce. Just sensible stuff, not eating crazy Big Macs and pizzas. And I kind of just did the pyramid, right? The old school nutritional pyramid. And then I watched my body fat and watch my weight. But I did drop one time, I'll never forget. Coach called me a big boy. I'm going to use these words. He called me a big boy. When I came back, at the end of my freshman year, he's like, what are you doing? And I kind of messed around my freshman year, at the end of my freshman year, partying and going a little crazy. Because I got away from my disciplined dad. And I gained some weight, right? I think I checked in at 142. And by the end of my freshman year, I was like 163.
Damn.
Yeah. And so he called me a big boy. And he told my dad he was going to cut my scholarship, which I'm glad he said that. And so I went home and my dad put the hammer on me. So I got down to like 136, but my nose is bleeding. And that's the only time I was never not number one runner at UT, is the time that I went overboard. And that's when I really tuned in of like, this is the line that I can't cross. Either this way, too low or too high. This is my optimal weight. And that's when it happened when Coach Brown said, you gotta change your lifestyle if you want to maximize all the gifts you have.
And how is it being a martial artist now and knowing, the Gracie diet and some of those sorts of things? Have you incorporated any sorts of those things into your diet or your habits nowadays?
I eat pretty good. I mean, not the Gracie diet per se, but I think at age 51, if I'm gonna roll and I'm gonna train and I'm gonna sweat, I can't be out there partying all the time. I can't I try to put good stuff in my body. I try to stay super hydrated because I do sweat a lot. I'm a heavy sweater. And I try to rest as much as I can. And so I'm pretty disciplined because I want to be able to do this effectively for a long time. That's my goal. And so I try to make smart decisions. Not to say that I'm perfect all the time. I'll stop by Mickey D's once in a while, or I'll go out for beers for sure once in a while watching a big game. But at the end of the day, I love this. I love the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. And me as a leader of a school, I want to lead by example. So I don't want my students to say, hey, we saw a coach out there, tripping over himself after class one day at a local pub. I want them to say, hey, coach is actually writing down curriculum and he's getting ready for our next tournament and he's setting up dual meets inside the, I want them to see that so the energy rubs off of my students.
And I bet that's a little tough. You guys have some good breweries in Michigan.
Yeah, that's like I said, I hit them, but not, right now, the last 10 months, it's not
right.
So much. But yeah, there's some good stuff in Michigan. Hopefully everything's going in the right direction right now. And that's a whole other podcast.
Yes. Have you ever been to Founders?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right on.
Grand Rapids is a really good place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you told us before that a couple days ago your ear fell off, and I know a lot of people who run for a long time have injuries, and of course jiu-jitsu have injuries. I tore my MCL and I haven't rolled in 3 years since then. Have you been able to maintain staying pretty healthy, and what sport has taken more of a toll on your body?
I look at my running career. I started in 1982. My first injury that took me out of more than a day was a metatarsal stress fracture in 1994. And then that was on my right foot. And then in 95 in the fall, or 90, yeah, it was in 95 in the fall, I had a stress fracture in my sacrum and my back. That was pretty painful. But then after that, I didn't miss any time. So I think in 20 years of running, I missed, not including breaks, maybe 6 weeks total. And then in jiu-jitsu, I've had a couple broke ribs. I've had 2 teeth knocked out. I've had a jacked up eye. I've had my ears torn off my head. I had a meniscus tear. Ankle, it was definitely broke, but I didn't go to the doctor, but I still kept going to class because I didn't tap to a foot lock. Arm bar, yeah, both arms hyperextended, fingers jacked up with arthritis. So I guess that answered quite. Jiu-jitsu's in my neck, C5, C6. I had an impingement into my spine with my C5. But I keep coming back. I don't know why. I just keep going.
So my question to that is, how do you keep coming back, and how do you roll, I guess, to negate those injuries or roll around those injuries? And did you kind of have to have a conversation with yourself where I'm just here to get in shape and, have some physical tests, but I'm not really trying to compete for anything anymore. I'm just here to be a professor and keep on doing something I love?
Yeah, the competitive bug hits me once in a while. Like I did a competition, well, now it's been 2019 because 2020 was no. But so I did the Michigan Open. I did World Masters a couple years ago, but what I did is my jiu-jitsu when I first started was more attack, stay on top, wrestling type, drive forward, pull out of guillotines, smash through triangles. Everything was really power, and that's what ended up jacking my neck up. And so in 2006, when the orthopedic surgeon told me that I needed to retire, 2006, 2007, he said, your neck, it's not looking good. My arm had fasciculations. I was cramping up. I couldn't, my ulnar nerve, like everything it wasn't that good. And I said, when he told me to retire, I said, that's not gonna, I'm still gonna, I'm gonna keep going. So I kind of developed my half guard at that time. And I tell any older student, if you can really develop your half guard game, a protective half guard game, that's to me, that's the longevity game. Closed guard, you can get stacked on your neck, you can get upside, there's a lot of things can happen there. But like with a good half guard, with a good frame, that's what I've done for the last 14 years. And it's kept me pretty healthy. I'll get my neck grabbed once in a while, but what I do too is if I do get in a horrible spot, I tap, and I think at the beginning that's tough for a lot of people to do, and they end up with some bumps and bruises. But I think, even like with your knee, you said you haven't rolled in 3 years.
Yeah.
So if you were my student and you really wanted to get back on the mat, you and I would do we would sit down and say, hey, let's do something here where I'm going to put you with brown belts, black belts. You're going to do, if you're going to spar, this is the way you're going to do situational training. You're going to do side control escapes. You're going to do different things where it's not stressing the knee. So you're still getting that full contact resistance, and type of training. And we kind of take that injury out of play. That's why I always tell my students when they say I'm injured, and I'm like, you can still come in here.
Well, the best answer for someone who says that they're injured or something hurts. I had a coach tell me this once. I got into weightlifting too, and I was doing some Olympic weightlifting, and I had done an Olympic weightlifting seminar, and just my shoulder was just blasted. I went to train 2 days later, and I was, complaining to the coach, telling him my shoulder hurt. And he said, well, let me ask you this. How often since Saturday have you iced? And I said, I haven't. He said, well, it doesn't hurt that bad. Get in the gym. And then when I went home and iced.
Well, and see, I think that's, when you look at any sport, running, baseball, basketball, football, jiu-jitsu, the combat sports, MMA, judo, wrestling, you will do what you need to do to get yourself back in position. So if it's treating your rehab like it's your competition, when I was injured in running, I was when I broke my stress fracture in my back, I had to get ready for the Olympic trials, right? So here I am 7-8 months away from the Olympic trials in 96. I couldn't run. I couldn't do anything stressful. So I got on the arm bike, right? So I did the arm bike 2 hours a day for 6 weeks every day. I mean, I'd go frontwards, I would go backwards. In my head, I'd do intervals. I'd do 16 times a quarter. I would do recovery, all of it. So in my brain, I wrote in my work log, I'd say, okay, mission accomplished that day. In my mind, I did 16 times a quarter. In my mind, I did do 6 times a mile. And then rehab the same way. I was like, okay, I did my stem, I did this, I did that, I did my ice, I did my whirlpool, I did my, I treated it like, like I had to get back out there. And if you don't do that, then you're not taking it you're not being as serious as you say you are. Because that's what I always tell my students about competition. They're like, man, I got my ass kicked at the, the Michigan Open, and not too many of them say that, but I've had a few. I can get the sense, and I'm like, because you're not sparring. You're not sparring. If you choose to compete, it's different than being a jiu-jitsu athlete that just wants to come there for a fraternity and it's kind of a sweat. But if you choose to compete, it's a whole different game. When just like wrestling, you can't just go out to the wrestling circle, smack hands and go, hey, I think I'm going to win this one with a guy that's doing aggressive takedown training every day. You're going to get smashed, so that's why, whatever you choose to do, if you really want to make that commitment to be good, you gotta get that work log out, and there better be a lot of stuff in that work log.
Yeah. I had another coach too. He used to tell guys, it's when you're injured is when you find out how much you really care about your sport, how much you really love what you're doing. Because if you really do love it, you'll be doing like what you said, where you're on the hand bike 2 hours a day. Whereas if you're only like a fair weather fan when you're into it, when you're healthy, and then you're off partying or going to McDonald's or whatever, and you put on 20 pounds or you don't do anything for 6 weeks, that's the individual. You'll really find out how much you really are passionate about the sport.
Yeah. And like, even when I think about my ears, it's like when I was really susceptible to cauliflower, right? Within a year, I had pretty banged up ears. And so one time they got so banged up where I had to go to an ENT, and they had to suture my ear so I could hear again, right? So my inside of my ear kind of came out, right? It was bad. And so he sucked it out, because I was doing it myself, right? I go to Walgreens, I did like this dive, I'm sucking it out, and I throw it, I'm throwing the shrins, and I'm getting right back on the mat, right? And so the doctor, so he goes like this, he says, he sutures my ear so it's pinned back. And I go back to Seneca. This is when Seneca's like, you gonna train? I said, I'll put headgear over it, right? So I put the headgear over it, and then I had the sutures in there, and I kept training. Just like with this, I never stopped teaching one day. Like I tore this on a Thursday and I taught Friday. I put the headgear back on. I get back on the mat. Now I know that sounds crazy. Not that I was doing full sparring, but I guess that shows you a little bit of the savageness of it, but the dedication, and it's what I want to do, and I'm going to do it.
It doesn't sound crazy to us.
No. Obviously an Olympian, so you have that drive, but where does that drive come from, and what is it to this day that keeps you where your ear fell off on a Thursday and then on a Friday you're back in there? What is that? Is it just like you said, you have an addictive personality and this is the addiction you choose and you just love it?
Yeah, I just don't like, I don't like, even from a little kid, so all of us don't, most people don't like to lose. Most people are pretty, are going to be competitive. I just think I've always been pretty driven, like when I started wrestling, I'll never forget, I got pinned, and I was like at the 61-pound weight division, this kid pinned me in like a split second. I'll never forget that loss. My dad actually pulled me off the mat because I went after the kid after. Swimming, when I first started, we did this 200 lap like swimathon, and your feet couldn't hit the bottom, and I'm like, I almost drowned because I wanted to finish this fundraiser for two. So in my mind, it goes all the way back to when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. I hated not so much I loved winning, and you probably heard this from other people too, but the fear of failure and not doing the best that I can do. And just like with my school, I want my school to be the best possible school. I want people that come from out of town to go, man, I want to go to Monroe Jiu Jitsu just to get some training rounds in, or I want to go there and learn something. And that's the reason I put so much into it. By when I traveled for RunSafer, my business RunSafer a few years ago, I had my black belt. A lot of people won't put themselves out there when they get they don't, travel to other schools. But like I said, being good friends with Marcelo Garcia, Saulo, Shanji, Andre Gaval, Keenan Cornelius, JT Torres, all, having these guys come to my house and train in my school. That's the competitive fire. I have to be the best that I can possibly be, not only as a jiu-jitsu practitioner or competitor, but now that I'm older, I want to be the best jiu-jitsu school owner and teacher and professor that I could possibly be.
You mentioned your school. You also mentioned the Run Safer brand clinics. At what point in your jiu-jitsu journey did you realize, hey, wait a second, this is something that I could bring to the running community and could be a benefit to males, females that are out running, whether it's in cities or just to be safer, to be more, be more vigilant with yourself, be able to protect yourself if, God forbid, a situation like that comes? How did that idea come about?
So, when I retired from running, I was, again, I had a great relationship with Adidas at the time. They were my sponsor all the way through my running career. And so when I retired, they brought me on board, and I did some stuff for camps and kids, presentations, and it was great. And then in 2009, 10, I went into running specialty sales. So I was actually a sales rep in the state of Florida and Southern Georgia. At the same time, I was heading toward, my black belt. So any of the cities that I would visit, so if it would be Atlanta, I would go to Alliance and train with Jacare. If it was Miami, I'm training, I'm training after I would do my sell-ins to the store. So instead of going out for beers like a lot of sales reps do, I had my gi and I'd throw my running stuff. I'd throw my samples in the car and I'd go right to the nearest jiu-jitsu place, right? So I was driving home one night from Miami back to Jacksonville, Florida. And there's a lot of windshield time when you're a sales rep, you just drive. And so I'm like, I love running. I love my jiu-jitsu. I'm going to get my black belt. How can I create a safety program? Because something happened at a store where a jogger was attacked and assaulted, right? I think it was maybe in Tampa, in the Tampa area. And that's really, where it hit me. It's like, man, jiu-jitsu is a great hand-to-hand martial art for the smaller person to be able to buy time against a bigger person. I wasn't thinking about creating you take my presentation, you're gonna be able to beat everybody. No, my program's about buying yourself time and getting the heck out of there. And so by the time I got back to Jacksonville, I said, I'm gonna go ahead and try to contact a lot of store owners and see if they would be up for me coming in and doing a presentation, just like the Good Form running clinics, the GFRs. I said, so it's gonna be the Run Safer program. And I started that idea in 2011. I got my black belt January 22nd, 2011. And then First Place Sports and a couple big accounts said, man, that sounds like a great idea. And I ran with it. And the great thing is at the time I was going in on Adidas because I had to go into these stores. And, so that way I kind of had that first year under my belt with Adidas driving it. And then that's when I had a bidding war, and ASICS said, look, we want to be part of your brand, and we want to send you all over the United States to teach these presentations because safety should be priority for the walker, jogger, and runner. And that was about an 8-year relationship, with ASICS. And that's when I got to travel and go to all these running stores. But at the same time, that's when I got to meet and train with all the best jiu-jitsu schools, because my idea was at the time, do the presentation, but the day before I would go to the best schools in that area so I could bring that school into that store and say, this is where you need to train. And so my network of great friends and my fraternity of jiu-jitsu brothers and sisters blew up in 2015, 16, because I would promote their school within that store, and then they formed their own partnership. And so that's kind of that was the I don't know. I'm just glad I had a lot of windshield time, because that's what made me go Run Safer, right? At that 80,000 miles of running, 2 Olympic teams, 7,000 hours or more on the mat for my black belt, and then I merged those two together.
And as that was coming together, was the school a thought, or was this something that came afterwards? And I mean, we Jimmy and I talk about the hero's journey all the time. So I believe you're originally from Monroe, correct? Mm-hmm. Was that part of the plan too, or?
So the plan, so I went through a divorce in 2012, and then, I was training here, training with Louise, training in my garage, doing private lessons, doing my Run Safer presentations all over the country. And then, my girls were getting older. They were getting ready to go to college down here. And then, I just felt like I love my hometown. My hometown's small. There's 18,000 people in Monroe itself, maybe 150,000 in the county. And I've always loved my hometown. I've given back to my high school. I try to give uniforms. I try to give back to any way I can. Because if it wasn't for Monroe and the people of my hometown, I would have never made the Olympics. If I didn't have the coaches I didn't have the support, if I didn't have the people that were there, I don't think I ever could have made it to where I made it, right? So I just made that decision. I'm going to go back home. And initially when I went back home, I didn't know I thought I was going to train at a school in Ohio, honestly, with one of my friends, Chris Blanky, who owns a school there. But then people in Monroe were like, hey, you think you could teach me privates in your garage? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So 1 turned into like 10 turned into 15. And then my buddy who owns, a lot of buildings downtown Monroe are just, they're vacant. They're trying their best. This hasn't helped at all, the pandemic, but there's, so my buddy says, hey, I own this building. Why don't you come check it out? I can build you whatever you want. And so went to this building, and he goes, what do you need? I said, well, I need like a 40 by 40, 2 bathrooms, a water fountain, please, and a shower, man. Because most jiu-jitsu schools and judo, you got to take the hose and like this. And so he goes, I can do that easy, because he's built some hotel. The guy's pretty handy. And 6 months later, August of 2017, he opened the garage. It's pretty cool. He built this garage door, so it comes out, and then it's pretty sweet setup. And that's all my private lesson students. They jumped on board. Word of mouth got out, and then we started in August of 2017, and then here we are. And it's great for my hometown. It's right in the center of the city. I try to do a lot of stuff, for going to the elementary schools, talking about safety, trying to help kids, trying to just help. I mean, I really look at it in my life. It's like, through hard work, I accomplished a lot, but man, I just want to help as many people as I can help through my accomplishments. And that's what I can do. I think I can make the biggest impact back there than I could have anywhere else.
And you talked about when you were going into the stores, you would go and make the connections with the local jiu-jitsu schools and bring them in. Have you had a lot of people throughout the years that have come to you and say, hey, I started jiu-jitsu because I went to your seminar?
Yeah, not as many as I would like, because jiu-jitsu is, as jiu-jitsu is like, you think you know until you know. You think you know until you put the gi on, and then you're like, whoa, all right. But that's the job of a good professor, a good coach, is like, you have to you got to get them in there. And then not just, I think schools that go right to sparring the first day, that's the way I was, I could take it, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like,
yeah.
Well, but I have had some people email me and say, I'm so glad that you talked about jiu-jitsu, or you put something. At that time I was on Facebook. Now I'm done with social media completely, but I would get messages that would say, now I'm a purple belt, here I'm heading toward purple belt, or I got my blue belt. Thanks, sir. I'm addicted to this now, and it saved my life. Those are great things. When I get those messages, or even some of my students now, man, they've lost 50 pounds. They changed their life. Jiu-jitsu has changed a lot of lives.
And how much has that seminar changed since you've been teaching it, or is it pretty much the same since when you started it?
It's pretty much the same. I learned from my audiences a lot. I've had women come up to me that have been sexually assaulted, or, every audience is a little different, because it is, I try to keep it fun, but I also try to keep it real. Every city I go into, I'll bring up one example that it happened in that city. So when people say, hey, it doesn't happen on my side of the tracks, and I'll say, well, here's an article, and it doesn't happen often, but if it does happen, are you prepared? Do you have more tools for self-defense, or do you have no tools at all? So what I always try to say, if I've done 500 presentations, the biggest thing I say is, look, I'm not trying to turn you into jiu-jitsu world champion. I'm not trying to turn you into a UFC fighter. What I'm trying to do is make safety a priority in your life and your family and your friends' life. And I'm trying to give you some tools, even if it's just safety tips, to buy yourself time if something ever happened, if you're out there and somebody put their hands on you. And then that kind of sets that seed in their head, like, well, maybe I should go to, the local school that Todd recommended, and tell that instructor, hey, I'm here. I went to the Run Safer Clinic, and I want to learn save your life self-defense jiu-jitsu. And, even if it's another martial art, that's the reason I never talk bad about any other martial art, because I think all of them have a place, as long as they're teaching you how to truly buy yourself time. If somebody grabbed you, or they throw you to the ground, or they're fully mounted, or they're grabbing you by the neck, 10 seconds, having 10 seconds to your favor is better than no seconds, right? So like, if you know how to protect your chin, dump your chin, know how to, you know, that right there, that's better than not having anything, you know, and I'm pretty, I'm sweating my butt off by the end of these suckers, because every audience I get in front of, I don't want to give them any BS where they're like, you know, I don't want to give them any false sense of security, you know, and I think there's a lot of self-defense instructors out there, not, you know, that if they're saying that you're good after one self-defense clinic, that's a bad self-defense clinic. That's horrible, you know? So I'm pretty real about it, because it's scary doing it for 8 years that it doesn't happen often where somebody's assaulted or attacked, but it's happened more than you would, you know, at the lake, in the lakefront in Chicago and Broad Ripple in Indianapolis. You know, I can go on and name, and not to badmouth those places, because those places are beautiful, but that goes to show you they can happen anywhere at any time. And, you know, I'd rather see you prepared than not prepared.
Yeah. And really, it's like you said, you only need that one technique or that one thing that's going to give you 10, 15 seconds, you know, because we've been big Steve Maxwell followers. We've had him on the podcast. He was the first American to get his Gracie black belt. But he always jokes and says that his greatest self-defense is his ability to run. So you talk about, you know, you just need one little thing, 10, 15 seconds, so you can get into your full sprint. And most likely, if you're already a runner, you might be able to run away. But it's kind of that combination of, you know, we joke about it, but really, yeah, running is a self-defense, because if you can't catch me, you can't you can't do nothing to me.
I rolled with Steve at Team Exercise in 2005 with Hedges Lebre. So Hedges was there, and Hedges was the lead instructor, I believe, and Team Exercise, right? Yeah. So he's that guy's you know, he's a good to follow, like fitness and nutrition. That guy's he's 1 in a billion, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's on our Mount Rushmore of like fitness. I hate to use the word, but gurus. He's up there for us. And when we had him on, he came on, and we're like, "Oh, what have you been up to today?" And he's like, "Oh, I just finished up practicing falling."
Yeah.
And we're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you know, like you get to be my age, like the leading cause of death for people my age or older is resulting in a fall." So he's still, you know, practicing break falls and different falls. And he's like, "Yeah, you know, we had an old refrigerator box, and I just cut it up and put it over the concrete, you know, so I had a little bit of padding, but yeah, I've been out there practicing my falls in the morning."
It's you know, it's funny, the first, you know, when new students come in, you're teaching break falls, front rolls, back rolls, front. They're like, what I try to do is I show them why we do this, you know, because sometimes you go into schools and they're like, they just start doing this stuff, you know, like, what are we doing that for? And then I'm like, this is why, because it is extremely important. If you don't know how to fall and you wrap up against somebody, or you get pushed, or you trip over something, that's, you know, that I teach that during the workshop. I teach that, you know, how to fall. If somebody pushes you on a bike trail or running trail, you better know how to fall and stand up and base fast, because that's those seconds I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So Steve's right. No matter, it's extremely important at an older age, but to me, it's important in all aspects, from high level judo to the person going for a walk that trips to getting pushed down.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've had 2 experiences where I've been out on the road running and I got my feet tripped up and I just did a forward roll and came right out of it and was good. And I was like, oh, that's all those warm-ups and wrestling growing up, all those forward rolls stopped me from smashing my face.
Oh yeah. A lot of break falls over the years. Break falls, stand up and base for minutes. That's what I do to my students. I'm like, we'll do minute reps of stuff like that. Stand up, break fall, stand up and base for a minute straight, and then just keep going. Speaking of wrestling, I always say one of my highlight events, you know, Olympic Games, of course, going to the Masters golf tournament was huge. You know, I watched golf and I went to the Masters, but I was fortunate. I did a Run Safer presentation at University of Iowa. I did it on purpose so I could go to the Iowa-Oklahoma State dual meet in the stadium.
Clever Hawkeye.
Remember that one? That was 43,001.
On the football field.
On the football field. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was called Grapple on the Gridiron.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when they broke the dual meet national record by like 23,000.
Yeah.
30,000. They broke it by 27,000. Yeah. And it was a beautiful day. It was 70 degrees. I just met my current, you know, my second wife, and she, I said, she didn't know wrestling. She didn't know anything. I said, everybody in here, they're going to have ears like me. Sure enough, we walk in there and everybody knew everything about wrestling, right? It was amazing to see that circle in the end zone and the intensity, because it went down to that match actually went down to the heavyweight match, and he had to stay away from a fall for Iowa to upset Oklahoma State. And it was so loud in there. That was a great day.
Yeah. I've had been fortunate enough to catch an Iowa-Oklahoma State dual meet. I caught it in Stillwater, but yeah, growing up as a wrestling fan, you had the old Iowa Public Television VHSs back in the day where we would order them from the back of the USA Wrestling catalog. So that was like a lifetime highlight of being able to go see the Cowboys versus the Hawkeyes down in Stillwater. So I can relate to that. I know that feeling, and just the electricity of being in a crowd of, it's kind of like going to like the state championships for wrestling in New Jersey or another state where pretty much everyone there has a real good sense of what's going on and is appreciative of the action. So it's unreal.
It reminded me in the running sense of like the only place in the US when I was running and people would pack the house for a 10,000 meter was Eugene.
Yep.
University of Oregon, they knew laps. They knew like if you're on 66 pace, 65, they knew. And that was like the feeling that for wrestling was, man, everybody knew every little move that was being made. It was heart rate was flying.
Yeah.
So before we got on this podcast, I was watching you and Bob Kennedy at the Prefontaine Classic in the 2 mile, and that crowd was going insane. What was it like? You brought up running in Eugene. What were those races like for you to be in that? Did that ever get you out of it, or did you never hear the crowd because you were so focused on what you were doing? And what were the nerves like going into running at Hayward Field?
I was so driven, and having my focus. And, I trained with Bob a lot. So Bob and I, raced each other in high school. He was a year behind me. He went to Westerville High School in Ohio. And so Bob was a huge, I don't know what you want to call it. He's a great friend, but that was the guy that I wanted to beat. And so my focus was, to run really fast. And I trained with him. I beaten him, did better than him in a few workouts. I'm like, I think I got him this time. And so I was so focused on that day to beat him. And I was running great. But that last lap when we took off and they did that it was loud. And I think I ran 56.9, maybe 57. I'll say 57 flat or so for that last quarter. And he got me by a split. But that was one of the biggest highlights of my life, just because it was one of those times where I even with tunnel vision, it was just the hair standing up off your arms. It was so loud.
And you mentioned you were a year older than him and you guys raced a lot, but you also said you were pretty friendly with him and trained with him. And right at the end, when you went across the finish line, you guys hugged each other. How are you able to be so competitive with someone like that, but still be friendly and not take it off the track?
Yeah, I think it started, and that's when I speak at camps or I talk to anyone about competition, it's who your competitor is, right? So like if Bob would have beat me for the first time in college, so he beat me the first time at the Indiana University, Tennessee, tri-meet, Miami of Ohio was in the meet. So Bob beat me the first time there. And he, right after the race, come up to me and say, man, you almost had me, shook my hand, want to do your warm down with me, you want to finish, he never gave me any reason to have a fire to get back on the bus and go, man, I'm going to dream, I'm going to get him. Right. He was a great competitor, incredible competitor. He won numerous Big Ten titles, NCAA championships, national champ, but he was always gracious when he won. And I think that's a situation where he didn't give me the fire he was always a good friend, and he's still a great friend. So that's the advice I give to any young athlete coming up. No matter how good you do, don't give anyone a reason to hate you or to really set a fire underneath them even more to beat you. Just congratulate them and say, man, you almost had me today. Because there's nothing really more demoralizing, right? It's like one race, I pushed him all the way to the end, like to the last 10 meters, 1992 National Cross Country Championships in Parkside, Wisconsin. I thought I had it, right? I thought I came down this last hill, boom. I'm like, there's spit. I'm like, I'm driving, shoulders are up. And then right at the last second, he passed me and boom. And I was like, and he did the same thing. He put his arm around me and said, you pushed me harder than I've ever been pushed at that time. But it's like, thanks, man. But then and we joke about it now, but I'm like, you know how many times you said I almost had you, but I never got you. I got him one time. I got him at the World Cross Country Championships in 1995. I beat him at over 12K. And I did the same thing to him. That was great though, because when he came up after me, I said, hey man, you did great out there. Good job. But I know his head, in his head, he's like, oh, I wanted to get him.
Well, you just need to show up at his house with an extra gi and be like, yo, I'm ready. I'm going to get you this time.
I wonder, I used to say this in some of my presentations. I'm wondering if there's any Olympic distance runners yet that have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I think I'm still the only one in the world. I think. I'm not for sure, but I don't know how many out there are training. I don't know. Like if Ryan Hall, do you guys see how jacked Ryan Hall?
He's beefy. Hall,
so I think Ryan went the weightlifting, bodybuilding, but and you can see that type of drive. Like he transformed his body quick.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Well, I'm trying to think any of my other high level running friends. They always thought when they heard I was doing jiu-jitsu, they're like, if anybody was going to do jiu-jitsu out of this whole running crew, it's you, because you was always like the crazy one. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not. I enjoy the art, but and again, it still parallels on it's a grind, and I just love the grind.
You mentioned that kind of friendly rivalry with Bob and how he was always a gentleman, and you guys were, he never gave you a reason to light a fire to have that kind of anger towards him or towards competing against him. Have you seen the opposite of that in jiu-jitsu though at all?
As far as watching it, or as far as for me personally?
Competing, like with a certain individual or something, when you're like, I'm going to get that SOB, or where it was a little bit more maybe competitive, or I guess maybe emotional.
That's the one thing I'd say even more so than running. Jiu-jitsu, there's not that many cocky jiu-jitsu great champions. Like JT Torres, you most humble guy on the planet. Marcelo Garcia, you wouldn't know he was like who he is ever. Salo, Sean, all these guys at the highest level. I think the white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, it forces you to be humble, right? It's like, because you have to go through tapping so many times and losing, whatever that means, that you're forced to be humble. And it's a sport where you're 1 millimeter away from, it's so close to being swept or being taken down or being submitted or being controlled, that I like people that are confident, but when you're cocky in jiu-jitsu, you're setting yourself up for failure, for sure. But no, I really haven't met that. There's maybe a few that say, hey, I beat that, but nothing that really sticks out. Most people, if I've been beaten in jiu-jitsu, it's a hug, it's a handshake, and it's like, hey man, where do you train at? Where do you, if you ever come to my school, you're welcome, or vice versa. It's a great fraternity and sorority of people in jiu-jitsu with all different backgrounds too. That's what I tell people. You could have a lawyer, you could have, there's so many different people that come onto the mat. And once you hit the mat, you're the same, and you're trying to help each other get better.
Yeah, we always say when everybody does better, everybody does better.
Yeah, for sure.
And probably one of the nicest human beings that we've ever met is Renzo Gracie.
Yeah, I never got a chance to meet
that guy has always got a smile on his face.
Yeah, he loves it. Yeah, I love listening to him and his enthusiasm and his happiness for life. He loves it. He definitely knows what he does.
Todd, growing up, I always had coaches, or my parents or Rich always would tell me that the lessons I learned from wrestling or running, I was going to be able to take with me in my life and use it as I grew older in life. And as a kid, I wasn't able to see that stuff, especially after a hard loss or a shitty weight cut. Do you have any moments that kind of stick out, whether it be running or jiu-jitsu, that was a pretty good life lesson and that you take and, you teach to your students?
Trying to think one that really, I mean, I've had some, the ups and downs. I always think about, part of my book that I've been trying to write this book forever, but it's hard. It's like, what drives me are, my book's going to be based on the failures and how I got through those failures, starting back in my first memory, losing my first race in 6th grade, setting my goal to be state champ or all state as a sophomore. I missed it by 1 place. Wanting to be SEC champion as a freshman, I got second. Wanting to be All-American as a freshman in cross country, I missed it by 1 place. So to me, my lesson to anyone is if you're working smart and hard, you're still going to have some, and you're setting your goals pretty high, you're going to have those downs that you think, but you're still getting faster and faster. As my high school coach told me, if you work hard and you work smart, your life is going to be like a roller coaster that keeps going up, right? So you're going to have your downs, you're going to have your ups, but you're constantly going up. And, that's probably the biggest lesson I would tell anyone is like, not every day is going to be perfect. Not every workout's going to be perfect. But if you keep waking up with a hard goal in mind, and you work hard, it's great. It just, I don't know, that still drives me to this day. I really don't think about my successes so much. I just think about what I'm going to do the next day to be better as a coach, to be better as an athlete, to be better as a dad, to be better. That's what I really, not to say that happens all the time, but that's kind of my focus.
And we like to geek out on old races late night. We'll get on YouTube and we'll just watch old track or cross country races. What is your favorite race or race that you suggest that we check out of yours?
Well, the Prefontaine 2 mile for sure. That was a great 8:14. That was one of the best that I ever, when you think about, let's say if you ran 200 races in your life, 99% of them hurt bad. Right? They may not look like it. They may not look it. You've had those days where you're like, but then that was one of those days where I was like, I was in full, like I just felt great the whole, that was one of those. Boom, everything was hitting on all cylinders. That's a good race to watch. The Gate River Run 1995 when I broke the American record. Gate River Run 1995 15K.
That was in Florida, right?
Yeah, that was in Jacksonville. Yeah, I ran 42:22. And I don't know how it's still lasted, but it's still the American record 26 years later. Not that many people, I always say not that many people run the distance, but I can still say I have it.
It's still really fast though.
Yeah, it ended up being 4:29 per mile for 9.3.
Yeah.
Another one, if you can find footage, was, which you probably can, 1993 Tokyo City Half Marathon. I ran 1 hour and 11 seconds, and I finished second behind Steve Monaghetti from Australia. So that was to almost break 1 hour for a half marathon was a big jump for me, a big day. And then I think probably the biggest highlight was 1991 at Franklin Park in Boston. When I wasn't really picked to win or anything. Pat Porter, some of the other, a lot of these guys were picked and I wasn't picked. And then it was one of those, I came around the corner down there coming off the big hill and I passed Pat and then the gap kept getting bigger. And then I'll never forget the announcer called me the wrong name when I was coming down the street. He called me, I think, Tom Wilson. And I crossed the line as a national champ and I made it. And that's when I realized, man, I went from a University of Tennessee pretty good runner to now I won the national championship in 1 year. So that's when I knew that I had a good chance to make the Olympics and move forward with my career. I kind of that segues into a story. I actually told this story this morning. You're talking about like professionals and working hard and making your money. And I said, my first contract out of college was $8,000 a year.
Wow.
So I made $2,000 a quarter, but they told me if I work my butt off, I can make a heck of a lot more if I accomplish these things up here. So I'm making $8,000, but they gave me these incentives to work my tail off, and I hit those incentives, right? So that I was just there was other reasons I was having this conversation, but I was having it because if you work hard, good things can happen, but you got to have incentive, you got to have that incentive to work hard to get better and better and better.
Definitely. And another thing we talk about too is 80% of success is just showing up. And that's one thing that we've learned as athletes is just keep going back, keep going to, like you said, you had a rough day yesterday, you had a rough workout. Doesn't mean that one's behind you. Let's go in with a fresh, clean slate and attack the day. And we've been able to have some success.
And I think another thing on that too is like, I tell everyone in my students or any athletes, emerging athletes or jiu-jitsu practitioners, and I'll say, it's also what you're doing out of this school or when you're away from the team. Who are you hanging out with? What are you doing the other time that you're not here? Are you thinking about your goals? Are you sleeping? Or are you hanging out with someone that's going to talk negative or drag you down or put you in the wrong mindset? I'm trying not to curse that much, but like, as my dad told me, you hang with shit, you smell like shit.
Dad's a smart man.
So that's, and that's another thing that, it's working hard. It's working smart and hard and surrounding yourself with people that have like-minded goals that are going to drive you. And that's the thing with jiu-jitsu schools, it's like my students ask me, hey, is it okay if I go to other schools and train? I go, heck yeah. I said, I want you to train everywhere because I want you to be exposed to get your butt kicked. Because if you're winning in my school every day and you never get challenged, you're not going to get any better. You need to get challenged. You can get pretty good, but like if you've got to challenge yourself by going out and driving yourself with other people that have that same goal setting, right? It's like when I left Monroe High School and running, I was the top dog, right? But then I got to the University of Tennessee. There's all these other top dogs that are trying to kick my butt. And then the pool gets bigger of those same people. So you start to learn, hey man, there's other people trying to do this, so that'd be the lesson I put on my board is work hard, work smart, and surround yourself with good people that are like-minded.
Yeah. I appreciate you telling us that, because that's pretty much how our philosophy was, especially when we were competitive athletes. And that was my edge, right? It was what I was doing off the mat, the amount of time I was putting in and knowing or believing I was doing the right things. I think having that edge is everything as a competitive athlete.
Yeah. Well, and even now, like what you guys are doing now, it's like what you're doing, you can't throw that mindset out. No matter, you keep that kind of same mindset with what you guys are doing now, or whatever anyone chooses to do. When I was a sales rep, did I like the job? Not really, but did I want to be the best at the job? I definitely did. And that's, and then when I started Run Safer, I wanted it to be the best ever. When I started my school, I think it's good to have that mentality. Sometimes it can be stressful to have it's hard for me to shut it off sometimes, but I'd rather have that than not have that. You know what I mean? When people say, hey, do you ever calm down? It's like, what am I going to, if I calm down, what do you want me to do?
Right.
I mean, I'd rather burn the candle than than it not be lit at all,
100%. So if we were to be passing through and showed up in Monroe and came to one of your classes, what does a class look like as you as a professor?
Come in, I'd shake your hand, say, welcome aboard. And then we would stand in the line. I start out with a warm up. Depending on the class, some warm ups are harder than others, but it's a similar jiu-jitsu, Brazilian, how I learned it from Seneca and Luis and Pedrino. So, we'll circle the mat, we'll face in, face out, hands up high, we'll go around for 10 to 15 minutes, push-ups, crunches, jiu-jitsu specific movements, break falls, front rolls, back rolls, shrimps. I'll say get a water break. And then depending on what part of the curriculum I'm teaching, we'll go through a series of 3 techniques usually. So if I did a judo throw to takedown, so I would show that like 10 times, make sure I go through the details, grips, where your hand should be, where your hips should be, boom. And then my school is different than some of the schools I go to because I want them to rep it more than some of the schools that I go to. Some schools rep for like a couple minutes and then they're like, right to the next technique. And so I'll let them rep a little bit more and then, pick up a little bit resistance and then we'll go take down to the next position. So I could go take down to side control, and then I'll talk about like the where your body should be on side control, not just like, hey, you're on side control, you know, like where your shoulder should be, where what I learned from JT Torres about pulling them in and where it's real side control. And then we'll go over that, then I'll have them work on that position. And then from there, maybe we go for the guy pushes and he turns into you, how you go right to mount. So those 3 positions. After we do that, I'll say get a drink. And then what I like to do is go into hard situational training from that position. So the person on bottom starts to feel 100% what it's like, and the person on top is trying to mount from that position or trying to work from that spot. And I'll do like everybody roll, you know, we'll go with everybody like 90 seconds in that position. Then I'll say switch, and then you'll go into the next person. I'll give you a couple times of different body types. Say get a drink, and then I'll say, if you guys want to spar today, we're doing 6 times 6. And if you don't want to spar, do 100 push-ups, 100 crunches, do something on the treadmill, do something active if you're not going to spar today. And after that, they're pretty wiped out. Yeah, it's about my class is about an hour and a half. Sometimes they'll go longer than that, some, but they're usually about an hour and a half. And it's a good sweat.
Nice.
I do have AC though. A lot of schools that I went to didn't have AC, but I've got AC.
I think it's important too, the emphasis on drilling. You know, Jimmy and I talk about this as we were coming up in the wrestling world. At that time in middle school or high school, we didn't necessarily have the IQ for the sport, and to realize, you know, it was like, we just want to get through the drilling so we can get to the live simulations. And it was go, sparring all the time. And, you know, now as I'm 44, I'm like, man, if I knew now what I knew back then, you know, about wrestling and technique and just drilling, and, or if some coach would have just pulled me aside and been like, hey, we've got to work on these drills. You know, that's always what I would say. Like, if I could go back and tell my 17-year-old self anything, the first thing I would tell her would be to slow down and pay attention.
Yeah. You know, I look at it like this. It's like when people say, would I do anything different, you know, with how hard I pushed on my distance days or my off days. But I think the reason we are who we are is because that's the way we do it. You know, that's just our personalities. But I think in jiu-jitsu, you know, the drilling side of it with resistance is important because, you know, I don't know who it was I was watching on YouTube, but he talked about concepts and like, if there's A to Z in jiu-jitsu, A through Z, and on Monday you teach A, and then you skip to B, and you never put them in a situation where they may think they know A, but they never feel it with live training. So they really don't know A. You know, hey, I know an armbar, but do you really know an armbar when somebody's on you? You know, or they say B, I know mount escape. Not if you've got a bigger person on top of you that's moving around and they're adjusting and you've never done situational training. So it's really hit home with me more that I own a school and I break down the details. Break it down. That's the reason I love my purples and some of my blues to teach, because it forces them to look at, it makes them look at the technique and the details of the technique so much more. You know, hip movement, elbows, hands, where their grips are. It's a completely, because some people are just naturally gifted so they can get out of certain situations, but they don't know the technique as well. That's the reason when I look at my belt promotions, I want you to know the curriculum inside and out, not just be able to put somebody in a guillotine and rip their neck off.
Yeah, you had mentioned concepts, and it took me all my wrestling career till, you know, probably 6 or 7 years into jiu-jitsu to kind of start realizing concepts. And there's a big difference between watching someone doing a guillotine and then feeling it and knowing the pressure and you know, you could show someone a frame, right? But if they don't have the comprehension of what that frame's doing, what it feels like, it's going to be hard to do that. And that's where all the time on their tension comes in. And later in jiu-jitsu, I used to get in arguments with my coach all the time because I was always so hurt. I just wanted to drill because I knew what the capabilities of drilling could bring me. But like you said too, you got to spar, you got to have that time on their tension so you can take those drills and put them out on the mat. So I appreciate your mindset on those things.
Yeah, for sure. It's a puzzle, right? It's like before a student should really get into full sparring during class. Now they get in open mats. I'd say be careful if you're going to do this on open mat time. But like during structured class, you got to put once my students know close guard, half guard, side control, bottom, back mount, front, when they understand that and had enough situational training and stand-up training. So then when they get ready to go at it or smack hands, they're like, if I fall in that position, I've been there before. If I get in that position, I've been there before. They may not be able to know all the submissions from that position, but they know those positions before they go full out live sparring. And I think that's what I feel has been most successful in my teaching is, and feeling comfortable with my students when they smack hands. Like, okay, I know when Jeff gets in that spot, I've seen him there before. He knows what he's doing from that spot. But there are a lot of, some people have the schools that, again, I came from the background where it was like, oh, we did like a little bit of combat jiu-jitsu in early twos, man, where like if my half guard wasn't tight, everything stayed tight, or you got to learn that side of it too. I ask my students all the time, when I'm teaching technique, can you get knocked out from here? Like I'll see somebody rolling and like they're doing like a weak underhook and they're not trapping here and their head's out here on a knee shield half guard where they pop up with an underhook. And I'll stop them and I'll say, can you get knocked out from there? You're not tight enough. You got to be onto the side more, So those are the details that I love. And I love having like some of the schools, you got 80 people on the mat. You can't go around and go, hey. But like, when I have 25 to 30, I like to do that too, is kind of go around and correct people and make sure that they're getting nice and tight and their technique's tight.
Yeah. I used to play a lot of quarter guard, and I trained with Richie and GL Martinez. And you think you're good at quarter guard, and then they bring out the darces, and you realize you got to tighten it up and get tighter, or your neck's gonna hurt for a long time.
I love the quarter. I love half, and it's like I trained with a couple black belts here the other day, and it's like I made the mistake, right? It's like because I kind of got lax training with lower belts, and then I was too far forward, and boom, I get darced. And so that taught me again. And then there's a lot of details from like Lucas, there's a lot of things from like coyote guard, there's things that get out to the side. So again, that's the reason I love it at age 51 is I'm constantly learning how to get better.
Okay. Todd, do you have a daily practice or daily ritual?
Daily practice, daily ritual. Not really. I just, when my eyes open in the morning, I usually have a goal that I want to try to accomplish that day, sometimes too many goals that day, but that's my ritual. I want to accomplish something positive, at least one thing positive each and every day.
Is that something comes to you when you wake up, or do you have a, Sunday, are you writing down a list for every day?
I have a calendar, like that work log or calendar, or if for some reason I didn't write it down, it's something in my head that I like, hey, I want to make sure I teach this, and that's what I want to accomplish. Or maybe I want to do something outside of my school for my community. It's usually something, it could be a phone call, like where I call somebody up that I haven't talked to in a while. Like I called my old college coach or texted me the other day and just had a conversation with him because I haven't hit base with him in a while. So trying to do something like that each and every day that brightens somebody else's day up.
Nice. What's Doug up to these days?
We had some good conversations. Yeah, I talked to him about the situation with me as a freshman, because writing this book, I want to put little parts of the book, like this chapter, the turning point. So the turning point in my running career, one of them was when Doug said, hey, you're blowing it, and he mentioned a story that I forgot about, like at University of NCAAs, and something happened that he pulled me aside and kind of gave me a good scolding. And at the time I was like, but now that I look back on it, what I told him the other day, I was like, man, I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you popped me in the ass at that time. So it made sense. And so he's doing good. It's just great to connect with people of the past that you haven't talked to in a while.
Is he still in Tennessee?
He's up in Michigan. He's up in Michigan. Brother up there and doing his thing. And, he's doing good during the pandemic because he sounded good. Yeah.
Right on. Is he in the Upper Peninsula or is he just in northern Michigan?
He's up there, probably North Detroit.
Okay.
Like in that area, northern Detroit.
Okay, cool. Are you a coffee drinker?
Decaf. Well, here's what so I decided to go off. So in May, believe it or not, with all this stuff that was happening, I'm pretty, as you can tell, I'm pretty intense, but in May, I went into AFib with my heart, Yeah. So my heart went into AFib, and I was a huge coffee drinker, like 10 cups a day. A serious coffee, right? So I had never been an AFib before, and I actually had to go get an ablation, cardiac ablation in my heart. And the doctor was like, look, a big trigger is stress and excessive caffeine. And I'm like, you just basically said that's who I am. That's who I that's who I am, you know? And so I cold turkey, I stopped May 5th.
Okay.
You know,
No headaches?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but I like the smell. Like, this is decaf. It's what, 7:15 at night. I just like the routine in the morning.
Yeah.
And
The ritual.
the ritual of it. Yeah. But I love the good smell of a good coffee.
Do you have a favorite decaf bean?
I don't think so. I mean, what am I doing? I mean, no, just as long as it's hot and I can smell it.
Cool. Right on.
What are you listening to now? Podcasts, music, audiobooks, reading anything?
Let's see. Podcasts, they've all been taken off.
Well, what were you listening to?
Let's see. No, I listen to Rogan. He's still on Spotify.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just keep it there. Yeah, I listen to Rogan. Yeah.
This one might be another conversation for another podcast, but we do ask all of our guests this. Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
Favorite conspiracy theory? Wow. I never thought about it until this past 10 months. I probably don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to no. I'm going to stay clear of that one.
Right on. You're in the tree of trust. We wear tinfoil hats all the time over here, so don't worry about it. But I totally understand. You gotta, you don't want to go full Eddie Bravo on us either.
There's a lot of them out there right now, and there's more that there's more. I agree with more conspiracy theories now than I have in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say. It's not a conspiracy if there's proof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Todd, we really appreciate your time. We're super grateful. Is there anything that we haven't covered about you or Monroe Jiu Jitsu that you would like to share with? And I know you said you were off social media, but if you wanted to promote the school and their socials and that sort of stuff, have at it.
Yeah, so like with what I'm doing now going forward, hopefully things are going in the right direction. Runsafer.com. If anyone out there is interested in a presentation or me coming in and doing a hands-on clinic, all the information is on runsafer.com. If you're interested in coming to Monroe and training a little bit, please do. MonroeJiu-Jitsu.com has all the information there. And outside of that, get up each day and have a good day. That's all I got.
Awesome.
Todd, thank you so much. As two kids who grew up runners, wrestlers, knowing that you're out there, an Olympian, black belt, keep doing you. Thank you so much for your time. You're an inspiration, and it was a pleasure talking to you today.
Awesome, man. You guys have a good one. And if you're ever in Monroe, grab the gi. Or don't even grab a gi. Come to my school. I'll give you a gi, and then you can train.
All right.
I have a couple clients in Michigan, so you may just see me show up one day.
Anytime.
Thank you, Todd. Really appreciate it, Tom. It's an honor talking to you.
All right, guys. You take care.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right, you too.